Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my first long format video and my first review video. So this is a long-term use review of a fairly unique product. So this is the Barrow DARIDP-30 240, but not the worst name, but essentially it is a 240 millimeter reservoir radiator with an attached pump and the reservoir. So the pump and reservoir are basically attached to the radiator using two mounting plates. I do apologize for the light. This was the best I could do for now. But yeah, essentially you have these two plates here that kind of sandwich everything together, giving you an all-in-one that's custom. So you can connect it in whichever way you want, add radiators. Now the reservoir heads up here, kind of skipping ahead. The reservoir is a little small. So this is one area of improvement. So as you can see, the pump's actually sticking out a tiny little bit more than the reservoir. So I do kind of wish that they utilized all the space that they had. Maybe, you know, in the future they can actually make a side reservoir to add basically, but I understand their logic. They try to make it as compact as possible so that it fits in as many systems as possible. And to give you a little bit of history essentially and what problem this solved for me. So I had a 1080 Ti that was I bought with a water block, so it did not come with a cooler, and then I wanted to use it in my media TV. So this was the most elegant solution, because for about $150, I want to say, I'll put links to all these products, but for about $150 I could buy this instead of buying a cooler. It actually did really well. Like, the GPU was always sitting in the 50 degrees Celsius or so, maybe 60s at most, in a fairly small compact space. So it was in the meshalicious. So essentially, if this would be the front of the case, this was basically pushing air out of the case through the radiator. It's moving a lot of heat. I did change the fans, so these are some MSI fans. Not particularly a fan of them, but it's just what I had on hand. And it does take any fans essentially, so all you need to do is just to remove two little bolts here. You remove the little blocking plate, and then you can mount any standard fans. Although you cannot, as far as I can see here, you do not have space for those thick 30 millimeter fans, so you'll need a 25 millimeters or whatever the standard is. But yeah, essentially it's a really good product. The main issue I had with it is the fans that came with it had a proprietary pin that had the RGB and the fan controller, and it would go, and the fan power, and it would go to a controller that I actually had glued here at the beginning. But I did not like the RGB control system. This was a whole mess to fit in the case as well. So I just got rid of it, changed to some standard fans that use the regular fan header and RGB. And it was working great. I do kind of wish I put some better fans to see, because these are not great. And then for the pump, it does look like a standard pump, the slimmer form factor. It's a decent pump. It does also come with a little knob, so you can control the basically the power that it gets and the speed that it's moving at. And then you can either connect it to a old school fan connector, so 4-pin, or you can connect it to directly to your motherboard, to a little header, which is the way I was using it. I do kind of wish that this was a little bit more modern. And then personally, I am a fan of controlling the pump manually. And in my case, this worked because I could have this like with the two little clips. I attached it to the outside of the case and I could control it at any time. It was actually pretty nice for like purging bubbles and things like that. But I feel like this doesn't really have a whole lot, like the pump itself does not have a lot of adjustability in the power. And also the higher power level is kind of useless because of how small this reservoir is. So if you run that at full power, it will create a lot of turbulence, and it'll basically, you'll just hear air kind of go through there. But yeah, so let's take this apart. I do have some B-roll footage of this running. Do expect some water. This was in use, but yeah, essentially fairly standard setup. Actually, I guess this is not really standard, because so this plate is kind of like where their money is. So it's this reservoir here along with the mounting plates. So you will see here, let's see how many cuts I get doing this. Sorry, I did not prepare very well. There we go. Okay. All this is my review. There's no sponsored or anything. I do have some advice for them in the future. Let me pour out the water out of here. But yeah, essentially you have a out and in. I'm pretty sure this is the out, the one by the pump, and then you have the in right here. Technically, I do believe you can use this one as an in as well. Maybe that would have made a difference. And ooh, okay, that's okay. This is why we have the towel here. And then they do have another port here, but I found with these recessed ports, so I'm using a bigger fitting in this case. This is fairly standard too, but the fitting's a little wider, and I found that this just does not clear the hole, so the O-ring does not actually seal. So the only ports I could use were these two, and I think I could have used this one as well. Not sure why I didn't. I guess this is more symmetrical, so I probably just felt better about it. But yeah, essentially again, you do have a Barrow pump here and then the reservoir. And we will begin by taking apart over here so you can see the fans. But yeah, it's a good product. If you are in a situation where you need something like this, I do think it's pretty good. It cooled the 1080 Ti, that's about 200 to 300 watts of thermal heat very well. I think it could have handled the CPU, and I was really curious to add the CPU as well, because it would have added more water to the system. Because one issue that I was mainly facing is, say every 2-3 months or so, the pump would get a little noisy, because the water level would drop. So it would start picking up the little bubbles, so I would have to, oh yeah, that's right, this was my fill port. So I would have to refill it every now and then. Now, I do also think if you have the space, and if this is the only solution that you can do, you can essentially probably mount a secondary reservoir that's higher up to just provide additional water. So in that case, this will kind of just become the feed reservoir for the pump, but you'll keep most of your water in the main one, and that way this will always stay topped up. And you'll have to like basically only do the standard maintenance of once a year or every 6 months, depending on if you use colored fluid or just clear fluid. Perfect. Now you'll see once we remove these two, you probably saw I removed the little plate over here. So this is just a little plastic plate. And then it does have a cutout for the wires. At first I was confused why these are here. But once you do that and remove the screws, you'll see that the fan just essentially slides out. Well, should at least. Oh, there you go. There we go. And you can see this has been used. I have a cat, so there's fur everywhere. But yeah, it is essentially a standard radiator in here. There's sandwiched in between these two plates. Very good construction. It's like very efficient, not wasting a lot of materials. And again, the only thing I wish is that this reservoir was just a tiny little bit bigger. I don't know how they could engineer that, but in my situation, in the Michelicious case, I did actually have about 40-50 millimeters, about this much space that was just sitting there. And all I could think about was like, man, if only this reservoir was bigger and the pump was a little further up, how much extra fluid I'd have. But you know, this does fit the form. There is one other company that has something very, very similar to this. Those two are the only two companies that offer something like this when I was looking for this particular solution, I guess, to my problems. And I decided to go with Barrow just because I did have one additional product from them, and I found that it was well made, essentially. Basically, it did not corrode my loop or anything. So, oh yeah, actually on that note, the reservoir, the radiator, I did end up giving it quite a good cleaning, and there was still some gunk coming out of it, but not the worst. I'd say the Corsair reservoirs are far worse than this one, or on par. But yeah, you can see it's a standard reservoir radiator here with just the channel for the fans, and then you can essentially take all this apart and break it all the way down. Technically, the way this is designed, you could I do believe they sell a 360 version, but I believe you can get your own reservoir and as long radiator, and then as long as you don't mind the fan just hanging out, you can essentially just mount this onto a bigger one. I'm guessing as long as it's 120 so that this fits in here properly. Now I actually never opened it all the way, so we will go ahead and do that. I'll probably speed this up, so I'll stay a little quiet. So it looks like, I think this was factory cross-threaded here, so that's a little unfortunate. So I did strip the little bolt, so I might not be able to take off this side here, or at least not without a fight. Alright, we'll come back to that side. Let's hope this side here is looking better. Perfect. So this is actually not a standard radiator. So it's very interesting. So it looks like the edge of the radiator is kind of cut off, shaved off, and they have mounting. Very interesting. This does allow them to have this additional fin here, and then basically this acts as the outside of the radiator. So I'm a little surprised, I'm not gonna lie, because it looked like just a standard radiator on the outside. But that would explain how they get this connection here, because this might be proprietary. So hey, scratch that. I do not think you can change the radiator on here. Yeah, so I guess once you do choose your size wisely, because it looks like you'll be stuck with this, you can just change the fans. Pretty sure you can change the pump if needed. This does look like a standard pump, but let's investigate this as well. Okay, so it's looking good so far. All right. So there's the pump. It's a little dirty. This hasn't been the most. Actually, no, it's fine. But it does look like a regular pump with a little cover on here to make it look pretty. So you should be able to swap this out for a different pump. Yeah, this looks fairly standard here. But you can see there is a little gunk in here that's mainly from the rad itself. Let's say 3. So I cleaned it up for about 15 minutes basically over a sink. So I gave it a quick cleaning, and then I ran that 1080 Ti for about 6 months. And I noticed it was getting very gunky. So I actually used that 1080 Ti for about 2 years before putting it in this system. And it never got as dirty in those 2 years with complete neglect as it did in 6 months with this radiator. So I do highly recommend cleaning this up very well and like flush it after a week or so and keep them. But you can see, so there's a big aluminum chunk there. And it does look like this is actually physically attached to the radiator. So this is basically one piece. I'm guessing it's glued or soldered in there. Future me. So I was actually able to see there are some screws in here and there that basically attach this I don't know what to call this, the reservoir pump assembly to the radiator. So they are 4 screws, but I've never seen a radiator that first of all does not have the inlet and outlet like standard fittings, or that would have mounting points there. So this is definitely proprietary. So you cannot replace this, or you can, but not easily. Yeah, this is the money maker right here. This is what allows you to basically have an all-in-one system that's actually a custom water-cooled system. Very unique product, fairly niche market, I would say, that would be looking for this. And I do think if they make this a little bit bigger capacity so that it like says like it needs less supervision, I think this would be like a really solid product that I would definitely recommend over an AIO. So if they can improve that, I'm actually even wondering if someone in the DIY community could improve that just by basically expanding this out. So some 3D printed, although I don't know if I'd really want 3D printed basically water barrier, as that can get really, you know, the smallest little flaw. Keep in mind these fluids, they are running at about 40 to 70 Celsius depending on your configuration, so you will need a pretty high temp composite for your 3D print to make sure that it doesn't melt. But yeah, removing these 6 screws here should give you access at least to the reservoir itself. So you can see it's just an acrylic piece here. And then once that is out, it's nice because you can actually clean it, but you can see it's like not a very deep, say, what is that? 10 centimeters, an inch. And then in there you have basically some galleries. Let's see if I can get a good shot here. The light in a little better position. No, I can't get a good shot there. Sorry, guys. But yeah, essentially it is all aluminum. Very nice machining work, in fact. Super smooth, yeah. It's a CNC'd. And then it has a little gasket. The nice part with being able to remove this cover is that you can just clean the reservoir fairly easily. So you can get all the gunk out once it does get in there. And then you just put the acrylic piece back and it's back to kicking up. But yeah, if someone could change this to something that sticks out a little more, basically a tiny, even I hope they can do it. So all they would really need is basically a little piece here to space this out. And then you'll have like a little additional, so you'll get a little more space there. Or they could just make this a little bigger. I would definitely be in for that. But yeah, great product. I do recommend it. I'll put a link to it if in case this solves a problem that you're having. If you want to reuse your custom water-cooled components in a small form factor, it's a pretty great solution because you can connect your GPU and CPU, and you can potentially, haven't really found a case where I can have a second radiator, at least not in a meaningful enough way where there's enough space to have two radiators in a small form factor. And if you're not using this in a small form factor, you might as well just go with a regular pump reservoir combo. But yeah, for small form factors, if you're looking to cool your GPU or just the CPU, pretty great option. So yeah, check it out. Just again, no sponsor links, just for your basically, so you know what you're buying. But yeah, if you're looking at buying this, good product. Definitely enjoyed it. Good value for money as well, considering that it's like a radiator, pump, and reservoir all in basically under $150. But yeah, I hope you find this useful. Feel free to subscribe if you feel so inclined, and apologize for the bad lighting. Feel free to leave any comments, suggestions, or if you have a video recommendation that you'd like to see, do let me know. I'd be glad to cover it and go in more details. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.